Every country normally has their own way of alerting the public when dangerous situations arise. Most commonly, this is a siren system, but there are plenty of places in the world which can take advantage of more modern technology, like radio, TVs, and smartphones. Because we more commonly pay attention to them, it makes sense to make a system that uses them to broadcast messages when emergencies need to be alerted. And as such, emergency alert systems were born. And while some systems are for very specific events, like Mexico's Alerta Sísmica and Japan's Kinkyū Jishin Sokou for earthquakes, other systems can alert for a wide range of emergencies. And in the US, we have one of those systems, the very cleverly named Emergency Alert System. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what it does, but despite it being able to warn for pretty much any emergency, it only has a limited number of options to choose from. So let's take a look at every single alert that we here in the US can receive via the EAS, and some times when those alerts went off. Now, first off, I think it's best to discuss how the EAS actually works, so we can understand what I'm going to say later on in the video. Also because I want to talk about it and this is my video, so deal with it. If you don't care, then skip to the next chapter. I can't control you. The EAS that we hear on TV and radio is broken up into 4 main parts: the header, the attention tone, the message, and the tail. The header is the most complicated part, but we often hear it as those 3 odd-sounding beeps at the start of an EAS message. But if you ever slow down an EAS header, you'll hear that it isn't just an annoying beep, it's an encoded message. This is what an EAS header looks like. The header is probably the most complicated part of the EAS, so let's break it down even further. And again, I can't stress enough that this is going to be a lot of boring talk for most people. So if you get bored, I won't blame you if you skip forward. The preamble is the binary 10101011 or hex AB repeated 16 times, and then the characters ZCZC. The binary is to calibrate the receiver, and then the ZCZC is to signal to the decoder, hey, there's information coming up here. Hey, pay attention, pay attention. Then we get into the stuff that makes sense. Next up is the organization, basically who issued this alert. There are specific codes that are used since only certain people should be able to activate the system. Firstly, there's PEP for the National Public Warning System, formerly the Primary Entry Point System, hence the acronym PEP. That's meant to be used for the president or other national officials during very dangerous and tense emergencies, like, say, an attack on the country. But if all is perfect, they may only be used for those national tests that happen every so often. Then there's CIV for civil authorities. These are for more local emergencies that happen, and can be issued by governors, local emergency management agencies, or local police and fire officials. Next up is WXR for the National Weather Service. As such, they alert for weather emergencies, probably the most common of actual alerts being issued. Then there's EAS, which is for any EAS participant. Mostly this is for the broadcasters themselves, issuing tests to make sure that their systems are functional and working. There's also EAN, the Emergency Action Notification Network, but that's been made redundant by the PEP system. But that's literally all who can make alerts. Everyone who can will fit into one of those categories. Next on the header is the event code. This specifies what the alert actually is, and because this is the entire point of the video, I won't go into detail on what these are just yet, but this is where they go in the header. Just know, for now, that these are 3 letters long. Next is the location codes. These specify where the alert should be sent out to. A singular code is 6 digits formatted as PSSCCC. The P at the start specifies what part of the area is included, where 0 means the entire area, and any other non-zero number specifies a cardinal direction portion of said county. So 1 is northwest, 2 is north, 3 is northeast, and so on. The SS and CCC are for FIPS state and county codes, and they're the ones that actually define what county and state the alert goes to. So to recap, if you wanted to issue an alert for northern St. Louis County, Missouri, just thinking off the top of my head here, you would make the location code 229189. 2 meaning north, 29 meaning Missouri, and 189 meaning St. Louis County. You can have up to 31 location codes per message, and if you want to warn for an entire state, for example, you can leave the county code as 000. You also have to end this with a plus, since dashes are used for separating the location codes themselves. Though recently, an erroneous alert was sent out to the entirety of eastern Kentucky, in which the alert included over 31 county codes. so who knows. Maybe that's because it was meant to be a test, maybe that's because it's just an FCC regulation and not a limitation of the encoders. I don't know, but fun to mention nonetheless. Next is the purge time. This is the time that the alert ends, formatted as HHMM. The H's meaning hours and the M's meaning minutes. There's a bit of specificity here though. Up to 1 hour you can have 15-minute increments, but if you go beyond that, up to 6 hours you can have 30-minute increments, and if you go beyond that, you can increment hourly. You can also make the purge time 0000, meaning that the message purges immediately, sometimes used for short-term events like tornado warnings, though the FCC recommends doing at least 15 minutes. And as such, you should not take the purge time of an alert to mean that the situation is now safe. For example, a hurricane warning might have a purge time of a few hours, but I'll assure you that hurricanes last for a tad bit longer than that, so always proceed with caution. Next up is the issue time. As its name suggests, this is the time that the alert is issued, formatted as JJJ HHMM. The H's and M's are the hours and minutes, go figure, but the J's are the day of the year, and the time is formatted in 24-hour Universal Coordinated Time, or UTC. So if you were to issue an alert for 8:10 a.m. Central Time on February 6th, again just thinking off the top of my head here, the issue time would be 0371410. 037 meaning the 37th day of the year, or the 6th of February, and the 1410 meaning the UTC time of 2:10 p.m., which translates to 8:10 a.m. Central Time. And lastly is the call sign, which identifies which station you're seeing or hearing this alert on. There's 8 characters to a call sign, but you might not need them all depending on the broadcaster. For example, if you got an alert while listening to the FM station of KMOX, man, a lot of things on the top of my head today, then it would be KMOX/FM. Because the header itself uses dashes already, you replace them with slashes. Or if you were listening to the St. Louis weather radio station, it would be KLSX/NWS. So that's a lot of information, so let's recap and make our own little alert. Let's say you're listening to the Los Angeles NOAA weather radio station on May 20th at 5:14 p.m. and the National Weather Service in LA has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for northern LA County and southeastern Kern that lasts for an hour and a half. So let's start at the preamble. So we put 1610101011 bytes followed by ZCCC and a dash. The National Weather Service issued this alert, so our organization will be WXR, followed by a dash. The alert is a severe thunderstorm warning, and we'll get into all these codes eventually, but I'll fill you in and say that this alert would be SVR. Now we get to the location codes. So we have to fill in northern Los Angeles County and southeastern Kern County in California. So for our first location code, we start with 2 for North, then 06 for California, and then 037 for Los Angeles County, followed by a dash, since this isn't the last location. For the next one, we'd go with 9 for Southeast, 06 for California, and then 029 for Kern County, followed by a plus, since this is the last location code. Then we get to the purge time, so it'd be 0130 for 1 hour and 30 minutes, followed by a dash. Now the time of issue, which would be May 20th at 5:14 p.m. Pacific Time. May 20th is the 140th day, so we put 140. Converting the time to UTC gives us 9:14 p.m., which when converted to 24-hour would be 2114, and as such the time would be 2114. So our full issue time would be 140-2114, followed by a dash. And now the call sign, which would be for the LA NOAA weather radio station. The call sign for them is KLOX, and as this is from the weather service, we then append /NWS to that, making our full call sign KLOX/NWS, followed by a final dash. So then our alert would be the preamble, I'm not reading all that out, ZCZC, WXR, SVR, 206037, 906029, plus 0130, 140, 2114, KLOX/NWS. I told you the header was complicated. Are you still paying attention? Hey, don't fall asleep on me now. Look, Subway Surfers gameplay! So hopefully that all makes sense now. If not, don't worry, it means nothing to the rest of this video, I just wanted to talk about it. Luckily, the rest of the EAS is much easier to understand. Next up on the agenda is the attention tone. This, as you would expect, is to grab your attention. Many people complain about the EAS and how it's annoying, but it's actually by design. On TV and radio, the attention tone is 2 tones played atop one another, at 853 Hz and 960 Hz respectively. These tones make a harsh, dissonant sound that should grab most listeners' attention, and that's by design. since the tones roughly make a major second. Not that pleasant of a sound. And that's been in use for years, dating back to the 70s with the Emergency Broadcast System, the EAS's predecessor. But if you're listening to a NOAA weather radio, the attention tone will be a single 1050 Hz tone. Much less annoying but still irritating when played for too long. The attention tone should play for a minimum of 8 seconds, but it can be extended to 25. After this is the message, which plays audio that describes in detail the alert that's being issued. For example, a tornado warning message might also include speeds of the storm, specific locations being impacted, and also how to protect yourself.
The National Weather Service in Norman has issued a tornado warning for southeastern Alfalfa County in northwestern Oklahoma until 10:15 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The FCC also permits video and text messages, but no one uses them. We're just used to audio, I suppose. And even then, some alerts, like tests, don't even have audio messages, since they're just used to test the systems. So for those alerts, you'll have your header and attention tone, but then right after, just get the tail, the last part of the EAS. While it sounds very similar to the header, this is much simpler, shorter, and consistent. It simply gives the same preamble of 16 101011s, and then the letters NNNN. This signifies the end of the message. Now both the header and the tail play their audio 3 times, and this is a redundancy check so that the decoder can guarantee that it got the full, uninterrupted message. And it operates on a 2 out of 3 kind of deal, where it will take the results that appeared more often. For example, if the decoder decoded the call sign portion of the header as KLSK/NWS, KSSX/NWS, and KLSX/NMS, it would work out to be KLSX/NWS. I think. And there should be at least 1 second of silence between the 3 sections of the header or tail. But that's how the EAS works. Now, it should be noted that this applies to TV and radio, but not smartphones. Those use WEA, wireless emergency alerts, but they have their own attention tone so that you, well, pay attention. If you actually watch through all that, I applaud you. This shit is nerd central right up in here. But I think it's finally time to get to those event codes. You know, the whole point of the video. So, let's get to it. Event codes are separated into 4 distinct categories: warnings, watches, emergencies, and statements. These are pretty self-explanatory and should normally be at the end of alert names anyway, but I'll explain what they mean regardless. Warnings are for when an event happens that poses a significant threat to either people or property, is heavily predicted to happen, or is actively happening, or when the time of an event is short enough that action is required immediately. Watches meet most of the classification of a warning, but the probability, time, or location of the event is uncertain. Emergencies are events that, by themselves, won't kill, injure, or do property damage, but may cause other hazards to form. And statements are messages that follow up information to warnings, watches, or emergencies. These are all known by the ending letter of the 3-letter event code, with the exception of a few. Warnings are W, watches are A, emergencies are E, and statements are S. So let's see what each alert is and what to do if one is issued. And as I said in the intro, I'll list one or maybe a few times this alert actually aired in the US. Oh, and with some of the stories that pertain to these alerts, they can get pretty dark and sad, so I won't be joking around during those parts. Sorry if it seems like the tone shifts in this video go all over the place, I just wanted to tell those stories as they are without being disrespectful. So with that being said, what alerts are there? We're starting off with a banger here, clearly. Administrative messages allow for local authorities to give an update on emergencies that are currently ongoing. For example, if an Amber Alert just got cancelled and they wanted to notify the public quickly, they could use an administrative message to alert the public. These are often used for Silver Alerts as well, which are for when elderly people, especially those with dementia or Alzheimer's, go missing.
A Silver Alert has been issued for Glendale PD. This is the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Glendale PD is looking for Hilda McGrady, 85 years old, 5 foot 02 inches, 152 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes.
In this case, Miss McGreedy was found safe and reunited with her family. But again, this is mainly used for updating emergencies as they happen. For example, in 2022, the Ashland PD and Ashland County Highway Department in Minnesota used this alert to tell the public that a road closure due to limited visibility was reversed, and the road was now open.
Road closure in northern Ashland County. The City of Ashland Police Department and the Ashland County Highway Department have jointly decided to reopen U.S. Highway 13.
If one's issued, pay attention and listen. It could be useful to know the information it gives you. As you would expect, an avalanche watch is issued when avalanches are predicted to happen due to upcoming snowstorms. An avalanche warning, however, is issued when avalanches are expected to happen due to current or incoming storms, or if they are actively happening. As such, these watches and warnings only really happen in the more northern states, where, mountains and heavy snowfall are quite common. These have been issued a handful of times, since heavy snowfall in these regions could indeed cause snow to rapidly fall down a cliff and potentially injure, as was the case in February 2024 in Idaho.
This is an avalanche warning message. The Forest Service Sawtooth Avalanche Center in Ketchum, Idaho has issued a backcountry avalanche warning. This message is for the avalanche danger is high. Days of heavy snowfall have overloaded a very weak snowpack.
If you get a watch, then prepare to leave the area and find shelter. Again, watches may not form into warnings, but you should always prepare in case one does. If you do receive a warning, then immediately leave the area to protect your life. A relatively new addition to the list of event codes, a blue alert is for when a suspect attacks a law enforcement officer and is currently on the loose. The alert itself is to specify who that said suspect is and to tell the public that they are dangerous and potentially even armed, as was such a case in June 2022 in Mississippi, when Brittany Jones was shot and killed by her boyfriend, Dante Marquez Bender. Officer Kenneth Kroom then reported to a domestic violence call at their home, but was then shot and killed by Bender as well, who then ran off.
The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation is alerting the public that a dangerous suspect is believed to be in the area of Lauderdale or Newton counties. Dante Marquez Bender is wanted in connection to an officer-involved shooting in Meridian, MS in Lauderdale County that occurred on June 9, 2022 at approximately 5:36 p.m.
Bender was eventually caught and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, with his sentence being 2 life sentences without parole. Though that isn't the only reason this alert goes out. In April 2022, Casey White, an inmate at the Lauderdale County Jail in Alabama, facilitated an escape with a corrections officer at the jail, Vicky Sue White. Despite the same surnames, they were not related. Casey was in jail awaiting trial for a murder case, along with having already 75 years for other crime sprees, but somehow was able to convince Vicky to help him escape. So she convinced other officers in the jail that she was taking him to a psych evaluation at the courthouse, but she never returned. And as such, a blue alert was issued, as it seemed that maybe Casey took Vicky hostage, or coerced her into helping him escape by threatening her life.
The state of Alabama has issued a blue alert. The Lauderdale County Sheriff's Office and the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency asks for your assistance in locating Casey White, male 38 years of age with salt and pepper hair, hazel eyes and tattoos on both arms. Casey White is being sought in connection with a missing Lauderdale County Correctional Officer Vicky Sue White.
This story does have a bittersweet end, as Casey would be caught and sentenced to life without parole, but Vicky would pass away, supposedly to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So if you receive this alert, be on the lookout for the suspect described. Don't interact with them, and contact the authorities of their whereabouts. A blizzard warning is issued when heavy snowfall with 35+ mph winds are expected for 3 or more hours. There's also a severe blizzard warning, an unofficial upgrade in certain regions, when winds get up to 45+ mph and temps drop below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. During blizzards, not only is it freezing cold and you risk things like hypothermia, but also visibility is extremely limited due to the windy snowfall. There also might be travel issues with large amounts of snowfall and freezing temps creating things like black ice. This is an alert that can indeed happen anywhere, but often happens in the northern states due to their likelihood of heavy snowfall, such was the case in February 2022 in Minnesota.
Blizzard warning in effect until 9 p.m. this evening. Blizzard conditions reducing visibility to 1/4 mile or less in blowing snow. Winds gusting as high as 50 miles per hour.
So what should you do? Try to limit travel to being only when absolutely necessary. And if you do have to go out, wear heavy winter clothing or layer up so you don't get too cold. More commonly known as an Amber Alert, a child abduction emergency is issued when a child is taken without the express permission of their parents, guardians, or caregiver, and law enforcement is requesting the public's help to find the child and their abductors. The alert itself is named after Amber Hagerman, a 9-year-old girl who was abducted in Texas in 1996. It was 4 days later her body would be discovered in a creek only a few miles away from where she was abducted. It was then that many laws would get passed in the federal government, one that actually created the National Sex Offender Registry, and one that would introduce the Amber Alert system. Now, it should be noted that an Amber Alert is not necessarily issued when a child goes missing, but rather when it is confirmed that the child has been abducted, taken against their will or their parents' will. Some areas, such as those in Texas, can issue an Amber Alert when a child just goes missing, so that no time is wasted in finding them. But there isn't a rule implemented nationwide. Now, these cases are obviously very sad and intense, and plus they happen all the time, unfortunately, so I won't focus on specific activations. But I will add on that Texas actually has this kinda sick siren sounds at the start of their Amber Alerts.
This is an activation of the Amber Alert system at the request of the Ennis Police Department.
Yes, I know calling a part of an Amber Alert sick is a bit weird, but hey, now what should you do? Much like a blue alert, be on the lookout, and if you spot a person or vehicle fitting the description on the alert, don't interact and call the authorities. Civil danger warnings seem to be more of a catch-all alert, as it tends to encompass a lot of dangers. Specifically, this alert is issued by local authorities when an event happens that poses a significant and imminent threat to life. For example, if water becomes contaminated or a terroristic threat occurs, this alert might be issued alongside a bigger alert. For example, this alert type was issued just a few months ago in Hawaii for the tsunami caused by an 8.9 magnitude earthquake near the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia.
Tsunami threat to Hawaii. There is approximately 1 hour to the first wave arrival, which is estimated at 7:10 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. Evacuate all coastal low-lying areas in an orderly fashion now.
Of course, there are proper warnings for tsunami, but there was a civil danger warning that was issued as well for Hawaii. But it's also been used for things like the release of hazardous materials. Such was the case in August 2024 in Rochester, Michigan.
A message from Rochester Emergency Management. Authorities are on the scene of a hazardous materials release on the highway in the vicinity of Interstate 90 and Highway 52. Stay away from the area and remain upwind to avoid possible exposure.
But yes, scary situations do occur, such as an active shooter threat in the Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin area in October 2021.
Ashwaubenon police are advising residents living near Cedar Ridge to shelter in place due to shots heard in the area. Stay in your homes until further notice.
Police responded to a home for a welfare check in Ashwaubenon, to which scuffling was heard in the garage, followed by 4 gunshots. After a few hours, a SWAT team was called in and found the bodies of Carissa Peranto and Brian Morales in the garage, in an apparent murder-suicide, where Morales pulled the trigger. But to bring this back to a more upbeat tone, this alert type was the one that went out to Hawaii in 2018 that claimed that a missile was headed right towards the islands. Okay, upbeat is a relative term here. Obviously, it was not fun for those who lived through this. Of course, it was all a mistake. I discussed that in another video, but indeed, the CDW has a wide variety of use cases. So what should you do? Well, quite bluntly, whatever the message says. Because of the sheer amount of things that can happen to trigger this alert, just pay attention and follow the instructions given. Basically a step down from a civil danger warning, a civil emergency message is issued when an event occurs that is a significant threat to life, but not an immediate threat. For example, in May 2023, a group of inmates escaped from the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio, to which this alert was issued.
Escaped inmates from Allen Oakwood Correctional. Please be aware and use caution. Do not approach. Immediately call 911.
Now you might say, we talked about a prison escape in the blue alert section, why isn't that in here? And to that I say, I guess that the inmates must not have hurt any officers while escaping, and thus the criteria for a blue alert wasn't met. But it could also be that because this alert encompasses such a wide variety of use cases, much like a CDW, they just shoved it into here, even though I'm pretty sure the blue alert was implemented into the EAS system in 2017. But hey, maybe it's a broadcaster thing as well, I don't know. Anywho, the 2 inmates were Bradley Gillespie and James Lee, who escaped undetected for a full day, crazily enough. Even crazier, they escaped by hiding themselves in a dumpster. This led police to obviously search for them, where they found Lee evading police in a stolen car. He was subsequently rearrested with new charges, but Gillespie was actually found dead, presumably by drowning, in the Ohio River. So all's well that ends well, I guess. Gillespie was a murderer, so I don't feel bad poking some fun at him. There's also CEMs for things like evacuations from wildfires, like in Rapid City, South Dakota in May 2021.
A wildfire is burning just west of Rapid City. Residents of the Westbury Trail subdivision are asked to evacuate immediately into Rapid City.
And silver alerts, such was the case in Clinton County, New York in October 2021.
78-year-old Rita Wilson was last seen this morning at 7:30 a.m. at 20 Elm Street, Redford. She has dementia and her family is concerned for her welfare. there.
And during 2020, when COVID was spreading, local emergency management agencies used CEMs to tell everyone to stay inside and stay safe. And this led to an alert sent out to Fort Worth, Texas citizens, including the line,
"Y'all stay home. Flattening the curve is our responsibility."
which might just be the best thing that New Paul has said on an EAS message.
Please stop flushing toilets.
Again, a wide variety of things, but not immediately a threat. Much like CDWs, follow the instructions given. Simple as that. A coastal flood watch is issued when floods from the coast are expected to happen, due to things like thunderstorms or tropical cyclones. A coastal flood warning, as you would expect, means that flooding is expected or is actively happening. As the name would imply, this is a warning only for the coastal regions of the US, and is only for when the water from the ocean is going inland, not because of heavy rainfall. So it's more for the waves that form due to things like coastal storms rather than the rainfall that they produce. So as such, I've never had to see this alert since I don't live anywhere near the coast, but in places like New Jersey, for example, they might get them.
Coastal flood warning in effect from 4 a.m. to noon Friday. 1 to 2 feet of inundation above ground level is expected in low-lying areas near shorelines and tidal waterways.
So as you would expect, you should avoid coastal areas and get to higher ground. And with any flood-related alert, don't try to drive through flooded roads. Turn around, don't drown. So this one is probably on the rarer side since this has such an odd use case. Practice or demo warnings are used when coordinating some sort of practice or plan for actual warnings. For example, if you wanted people to practice their tornado safety precautions, you could send out this alert and tell them to act as if a tornado warning had just been issued. It's a good way to make sure everyone is prepared in the event of a real emergency happening. It seems that it can also be used for testing the alert system itself, making sure it's functional. But the difference between this and a required weekly and monthly test is that this seems to be issued by the civil authorities and not the broadcaster. Of course, most civil authorities don't use this alert and leave it to the broadcaster to test. And if you're planning on coordinating a drill for something like tornadoes, most will use the actual alert type itself and specify in the alert that it's a test. But this alert still does exist and has been issued a few times, like in Washington in 2020, where it was used to see the effectiveness of the alert from the Washington State Emergency Management.
This is a test of the capability to relay emergency messages from non-National Weather Service sources using Department of Homeland Security and National Weather Service systems.
It was also issued in New Hampshire in 2021 for similar reasons.
The New Hampshire State Police has activated the New Hampshire Emergency Alert System in order to conduct a practice demo. This concludes this test of the New Hampshire Emergency Alert System.
So, should you do anything? Well, technically you don't have to, but if the alert is sent to have you enact some sort of safety routine like a drill, then it wouldn't hurt to do so. A dust storm warning is issued when blowing dust is expected to reduce visibility to a quarter mile or less. Normally, this also includes some strong and potentially damaging winds. Of course, this is an alert that is normally issued in the drier parts of the country, as was the case in New Mexico in 2023.
The National Weather Service in Albuquerque has issued a dust storm warning for southeastern Roosevelt County and east central New Mexico, eastern Curry County and east central New Mexico, until 4 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Hazard, less than a quarter mile visibility with damaging wind in excess of 65 miles per hour.
Michael Reeves even got one while he was out riding his motorbike in the Anza Borrego Desert State Park in California. And he showed why it's important to heed the warnings in the alert.
Oh no! Oh shit! Oh my fucking god!
So what should you do? Well, avoid travel at all costs since visibility will be limited to none. Pull over, turn your lights on, and wait it out. Pull aside, stay alive. And if you can, get into an area where you can't breathe in the dust, since it is generally advisable to not breathe in the dust, as it can probably lead to some health complications. Or so I'm told. If you can't get into an area that is free from dust, wear something that you can use as a mask so as to not breathe in the dust. Formerly the Emergency Action Notification, hence EAN being the event code, the National Emergency Message is probably the oldest and most important in the catalog of SAME codes. That's because this is the alert that will be used when the president needs to address the nation during times of nationwide crisis. Thankfully, as of now, this hasn't happened, and the only time this alert was issued was a nationwide test in 2011, which, as we all know, worked perfectly fine and didn't screw up at all. Yeah, that test was plagued with issues. The first and only time this alert was issued, some stations got an alert that was just hard to listen to because the audio kept layering upon itself.
Emergency. The attention signal you just heard would have been followed by emergency information, news, or...
And for DirecTV viewers specifically, they got treated to Lady Gaga's Paparazzi. I've talked about this before, but it's always just so funny that it fucked up in this way. And I think it's pretty obvious what to do. Follow the instructions given. God forbid this alert is actually used to give instructions. This one's another odd one since it's actually been unimplemented from the EAS system, but I'll still cover it. In 2012, the FCC changed how emergency action notifications work, renaming them to the National Emergency Message and as such making them a more normalized EAS alert, where they end when they end. But prior to that, an emergency action termination was used to end a previously issued EAN, though in the one time that it would have been used, it wasn't. Maybe since it was a test and not an actual alert, but still odd. And so we've never gotten to see this alert, and we probably never will. Probably for the better, all things considered. Despite it seeming like a fairly mundane and common alert, there are some interesting things going on with this one. As you'd expect, an earthquake warning is issued when seismographs detect an earthquake's preliminary waves, or P waves, most commonly along the west coast via the use of the Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System. But because of how long it takes for the EAS system on TVs and radios to actually get to the message portion of an alert, this alert is often just seen on smartphones via the wireless emergency alert system. But that's not to say that this alert has never been seen or heard on the other media. It's just that earthquake warnings on TV and radio happen to always be drills, like was the case in the Virgin Islands in 2022, as they participated in the Great Shakeout of 2022.
The civil authority has issued earthquake warning for the following counties or areas: Virgin Islands of the United States. Drop, cover and hold for 60 seconds and then evacuate and find high ground. Great Shakeout exercise. This is Great Shakeout exercise, earthquake exercise.
Oh, and this is the one of two same codes that is actually used by Mexico. I mentioned this system in the intro, so no shocker there, but this isn't the only one. Either way, to repeat what I said, it's a part of SASMEX, or the Mexican Seismic Alert System, Sistema de Alerta Sísmica Mexicano. Specifically, this one is just called Alerta Sísmica, and features this warbly sound?
Alerta sísmica. Alerta sísmica.
Very distinct, and while it may sound odd to those who don't live in Mexico, it probably sounds horrifying to those who do. So what should you do when you get an earthquake warning? Duck, cover, and hold. Or to expand on that, duck to the floor, cover yourself under a sturdy surface away from objects that may fall, and hold that position until the shaking subsides. The exact opposite of a shelter-in-place message, an evacuation immediate is used when civil authorities or the NWS need people to get out of their homes for a while due to dire and dangerous circumstances. For weather-related events, this can be used for droughts, floods, hurricanes, and even wildfires, as was the case in August 2021 in Chelan County, Washington. Chelan, I don't know, I'm not a Washingtonian.
The Chelan County Sheriff's Office has issued a Level 3 fire evacuation notice for the following areas due to an active wildfire: South Lakeshore up Lake from Fields Point Landing, South Lakeshore up Lake from Fields Point Landing.
But it can be used as well for things like chemical or radiological leaks or terrorist attacks. Such was the case in February 2025 when the authorities in Reno, Kansas issued an evacuation because of a gas line leak.
Gas line leak, evacuate area between Avenue Adams/Poplar and Avenue A/Frank Hart. Leave the area now. Do not return until further notice.
If you get this alert and you're in the affected area, heed the warning and leave the area as described in the alert. And if you're not in the area, don't try to enter the area. Wait until the alert is lifted to return back. There are a few wind-related warnings here, but this is the first we got. An extreme wind warning is issued when winds of 100 knots or higher are expected in an area within 1 hour. But this alert is pretty much only issued in correlation to a hurricane or typhoon. They can be issued for derechos or non-convective downslopes, but in reality, it's only used for tropical cyclones. And such was the case when Hurricane Ian began to make landfall in Florida in September 2022.
At 7:27 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, National Weather Service Doppler radar indicated extreme winds associated with the eye wall of Hurricane Ian, with 11 miles southeast of Arcadia, moving northeast at 10 miles per hour. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. Take cover now. Treat these imminent extreme winds as if a tornado was approaching and move immediately to the safe room in your shelter. Take action now to protect your life.
There have been other occurrences of this warning for other hurricanes, but this alert is quite a rare one, so it seems to not have been captured all that often. It doesn't help that it's in the bunch of alerts that were introduced in 2017, so any hurricane before that didn't have this alert to issue. Either way, if this alert is issued, treat it as if it were a tornado warning, since the damage caused by this great amount of wind can be equivalent to a low to mid-rank tornado. Get to the lowest floor of a sturdy building, away from windows, and wait out the winds until they subside. Our first threefer, which is quite interesting indeed. But for the start of this, let's focus on the first two. The flash flood watch and warning are issued when flash flooding either has the potential to happen, or when flash flooding is imminent or currently ongoing. Flash flooding can be the result of a few things, but mainly these two. Firstly, storms, as you'd expect. Heavy rainfall tends to cause certain areas to very quickly flood, and these alerts are issued all the time, as was the case in Pinal County, Arizona, in October 2025.
At 10:35 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Emergency Management reported thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warned area. Between 2 and 3 inches of rain have fallen. Flash flooding is already occurring. This is a flash flood emergency for Whitlow Canyon and Queen Creek. This is a particularly dangerous situation. Seek higher ground now.
Though this alert actually was upgraded to a flash flood emergency, as you hear in the alert. Some weather warnings can be upgraded to emergencies when there is a great threat to safety, and it is either most definitely imminent or is actively happening. But another way this warning can be issued is for dam breaks, and that was the case in Maui, Hawaii in March 2021, when the Kaupakalua Dam failed.
Flash flood warning for a dam failure below Kaupakalua Dam in the island of Maui until 5:45 p.m. At 2:42 p.m., Emergency Management reported the imminent failure of Kaupakalua Dam. Stay away from streams, rivers, drainage ditches, and culverts, even if they are currently dry. Turn around, don't drown.
Now to that third oddball alert. A flash flood statement is merely just an update of a previously issued flash flood watch or warning. It'll give updates on the situation, such as extensions of the alerts.
The National Weather Service in Birmingham has extended the flash flood warning for Cherokee County in northeastern Alabama, Etowah County in northeastern Alabama, until 6:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
If these alerts are issued, you should seek higher ground and stay away from rivers or other bodies of water. And if you can, get out of the area, but remember, turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roadways. You remember everything I just talked about with the flash flood alerts? Yeah, basically slap that onto here, except it's for normal flooding and not flash flooding. The difference between normal flooding and flash flooding is the time it takes to flood. Flash flooding tends to happen very quickly, while regular flooding is more gradual. That doesn't mean it's any less dangerous, floods are floods, but this one at least gives some more leniency before the water tries to kill you. And I should show an example here, so let's make it somewhat interesting. In June 2022, a glacier-dammed lake outburst occurred near Juneau, Alaska, causing a flood warning to be issued, which is very Alaska of them.
Flood warning for glacier dam lake outburst in effect until 10 p.m. Alaska Daylight Time Friday. Flooding of rivers, creeks, streams, other low-lying areas, and flood-prone locations is imminent or occurring.
The same rules apply to flood warnings as they do to flash flood warnings. Get to higher ground, turn around, don't drown. No, this isn't an alert that's issued when I drop a new video, unfortunately. A fire warning is issued when a major, uncontrollable fire threatens populated areas. Normally, this equates to a large wildfire. This alert tends to go out in areas with drier climates, whose weather conditions are more favorable for fire to spread, such as the states near the US-Mexico border. But it can happen anywhere given the right circumstances, like was the case in March 2021 in Shawnee County, Kansas.
Wildland fire in Dover Township, 57 Davis, powered by winds. Please avoid area as it is dangerous. Please avoid area. Emergency vehicles in active operations.
If you get this alert, it should be treated as an evacuation, and follow the evacuation messages given to you in the alert, as the fire could have spread to major roadways. So this one's going to be a bit different than the rest. That's because while this is a valid SANE code, it is not implemented in the US's EAS system, but rather Canada's Alert Ready system. I'm still going to cover it because why not? Flash freeze warnings are issued when there is going to be a rapid drop in temperature, causing wet surfaces to quickly freeze up, making traveling either by vehicle or on foot extremely difficult. Now, this being a non-US alert makes it damn near impossible to find any good footage of this, but some footage does exist, like of this Environment Canada guy constantly being cut off by the alerts.
A flash freeze warning is continued.
So what should you do? Well, stay indoors for the time being, and exercise extreme caution if you do decide to travel. This one is also quite weird, but at least it exists for the US EAS. A freeze warning or frost warning in Canada is for when widespread freezing temperatures are expected. It's mainly for farmers, since freezing temps and frost can kill crops and other vegetation. This is why the alert is only ever issued during the growing season of crops, since farmers tend to know that winter makes cold weather. But it can also damage unprotected outdoor plumbing, so there's something for the common man. Now, these alerts have been seen, but they're rarely ever toned, meaning you won't hear those jarring beeps at the start of the alert. They normally are just issued via NOAA weather radios and just kinda appear, like was the case in western Missouri/eastern Kansas in April 2020.
The following is a freeze warning for the following counties in Missouri, Cass and Johnson. Sub-freezing temperatures as low as 28 expected. Frost and freeze conditions will kill crops, another sensitive vegetation, and possibly damage unprotected outdoor plumbing. Take steps now to protect tender plants from the cold. To prevent freezing and possible bursting of outdoor water pipes, they should be wrapped, drained, or allowed to drip slowly. Those that have in-ground sprinkler systems should drain them and cover above-ground pipes to protect them from freezing.
So what should you do? Well, if you're not a farmer and don't have any outdoor plumbing, brace for the cold weather, I guess. But if either of those sounds like you, then protect the stuff that needs to be protected, whether that be your crops or your plumbing. There does also exist a freeze watch under the code FCA, but it's not listed anywhere normally and is considered unimplemented. But I've seen a video on it being on someone's NOAA weather radio.
Following is a freeze watch from the National Weather Service.
And on one of NWS Baltimore/Washington's pages, so I don't know. These freeze alerts are messy. This one might seem out of place, but it technically comes before the other hurricane alerts, so we're going to discuss this one first. A hurricane local statement is for updates on hurricane conditions. It doesn't necessarily mean that a hurricane is in the area quite yet, but it gives updates on the current watches and warnings, as well as current conditions for the affected areas. These alerts are normally given hourly and aren't actually broadcast on radio or TV, as the alerts aren't describing imminent life-threatening situations, and the frequency of the alerts would definitely piss people off. But they can be seen on the NWS's website and via NOAA weather radio updates, but normally without the headers. As such was the case with Hurricane Zeta in October 2020.
Tropical Storm Zeta is expected to impact portions of North and West Georgia late Wednesday into Thursday. Tropical Storm Zeta is moving northwest and is expected to turn northeast on Wednesday morning, making landfall on the southeast Louisiana coast Wednesday evening. Maximum sustained winds are expected to be in the 25-35 miles per hour range, with gusts as high as 45 miles per hour.
When this alert is issued, pay attention, as the information may be important regarding your area's situation regarding a hurricane. Stay indoors, but be prepared to evacuate if need be. Avoid flooded roads, turn around, don't drown, and keep up to date with the news of the hurricane. A hazardous materials warning is for when hazardous materials have escaped containment or otherwise pose a significant threat to life. Mostly this tends to be for things like natural gas leaks, but can also be for things like propane gas or anhydrous ammonia. In fact, an anhydrous ammonia leak caused this alert to be issued in Adams County, Nebraska in November 2025.
There is an anhydrous leak south of Higway 6 on J Street. If you smell an odor, seek shelter indoors.
Now, what you should do depends on the type of material that has escaped. You might need to shelter in place so that you don't go near the area of the material. Or if the material is something like natural gas, which is sent into homes, you might need to evacuate so you are, yet again, away from the gas. If you are to shelter in place, close all doors and windows, get to a ground level room with no windows, turn off all fans or anything that can bring in outside air, and seal all doors and vents. We're back to the cyclones, baby! As can be expected, a hurricane watcher warning is for when a hurricane is expected to hit land soon. For the watch, that alert is issued when hurricane conditions are expected within 48 hours. Not that a hurricane will happen, but that a hurricane is expected to happen. The warning is issued when hurricane conditions, or 74+ mile-an-hour winds, are expected, normally within 36 hours of advance notice. Now, the southeastern USA has gotten its fair share of hurricanes, so they often get them when hurricane season comes around. But I think the interesting thing to note is that with hurricanes, there are often a slew of alerts that get issued. So hurricane warnings don't normally just appear. They have to form from other alerts, like hurricane watches. So most alerts you find are just saying the hurricane watch has been upgraded to a hurricane warning, like when Hurricane Irma was headed towards Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands in 2017.
A hurricane watch has been upgraded to a hurricane warning for the following municipalities in Puerto Rico.
But an interesting thing to note is that in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, these alerts replace the hurricane with typhoon, since that's more appropriate for the region. I can't find any footage or audio of this, but apparently that's true, and I have no reason to doubt it. Now, hopefully you should know what to do when a hurricane is expected to be in your area, but if you don't, either get the hell out of there or buckle up for a long ride. If you're sheltering in place, make sure to stay in a small interior room on the lowest level. Put as many walls between you and the outside as possible, and stay away from windows. High wind watches and warnings are issued when high winds are possible or are expected/actively happening. High winds in this case either mean the winds are going to be 40+ miles an hour for at least 1 hour, or there are wind gusts of at least 58 miles an hour. Now, the watches are seldom seen/heard from normal TVs and radios. They are properly issued on NOAA weather radios, and the news will probably cover it in their weather segments, but they normally go unnoticed. The warnings, however, do get issued everywhere properly, as was the case in Southeast Alaska in January 2022.
High wind warning in effect from 6 a.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Alaska Standard Time Saturday. Southeast winds 25 to 35 miles per hour with gusts to 60 miles per hour expected. Damaging winds will blow down trees and power lines. Power outages are possible. Isolated landslides are possible.
If you get these alerts, you should move objects that could easily be windswept indoors, such as lawn furniture, trash bins, or outdoor decorations. Driving may also be affected because of the high winds, so you should go under the speed limit just to be safe. Another catch-all alert here, similar to the civil emergency message and civil danger warning. Compared to those two though, the local area emergency is for when the event that occurs isn't itself a significant threat to life, but it can escalate into one. But as it stands, this is another one of those catch-all alerts, meaning that local law enforcement agencies can issue it whenever they really feel like it. And to prove that point further, this alert was issued due to an escaping inmate in St. Mary, Louisiana in November 2025.
There has been an escape at the Barrack Jail. White male, gray jogging pant, report suspicious activity to 911, report to Barrack Police.
It was also issued for an active shooter threat in the South Lake Mall in Gary, Indiana in December 2021.
Please avoid the area near South Lake Mall and the nearby vicinity on US 30 until further notice due to police activity.
But to shake things up, here's one being issued for a highway closure in Ashland, Wisconsin due to winter weather.
Road closure in northern Ashland County. US Highway 2 and State Highway 13 North is declared impassable and close on the Swamagan Bayfront between State Highway 112 in the city of Ashland and State Highway 13 North in the town of Eileen due to extreme weather conditions. Motorists must use the designated State Highway 137 alternate route.
Now, to elaborate on the other stories, the escaped inmate was either Brandon Lee Brunette or Cecil Michael Stratton, both inmates at the Berwick Police Department jail, who worked together to escape. Brunette was captured fairly quickly, but it took 3 days to find and recapture Stratton. And with the active shooter threat, 5 shots rang out at the South Lake Mall, but no injuries were reported, just broken glass. As far as I can tell, there's been no suspect named, so I don't know if they caught whoever did it. Much like the CEM and CDW, just follow the messages given and all should be well. We're not out of the catch-all hole just yet. The law enforcement warning is issued when an event occurs that poses a significant threat to public safety, like jailbreaks, riots, and bomb threats. Though because law enforcement agencies can just kind of issue these whenever they feel like it can be for a wide range of things. Like, for example, in Nashville, Tennessee, where police were on the lookout for a possibly armed suspect.
Law enforcement in area of Weekly Lane and Couchville Pike looking for suspect who is possibly armed. Suspect described as Hispanic male, wearing plaid shirt and jeans. Last seen on foot in area. If spotted, do not approach, call 911.
But in Hastings, Nebraska, they issued this alert to inform the public about scam calls supposedly coming from the police station and asking for money.
There have been multiple scam calls that appear to be coming from Adams County Sheriff's Department stating there is a warrant for arrest and to pay money over the phone. Do not agree to pay any money to any law enforcement agency over the telephone. Hang up and immediately call the Sheriff's Department.
Now, with that armed suspect in Tennessee, that suspect was Jorge Reyes, a 43-year-old man who shot and killed his friend, 35-year-old Rigoberto Rizzo Hernandez, the previous day. As far as I can tell, there was a manhunt for him and charges of first-degree murder, but I haven't found an article saying that he was found and arrested. The only update I can find is from a day later saying that he wasn't caught. As always with these alerts, heed the warnings in the messages. How many times can I say that before you get bored? This one is quite interesting since it is one of the newest alerts to be added to the optional SAME codes, only being added in 2024. The Missing and Endangered Persons Alert is known by a variety of names like Turquoise Alert, Ashanti Alert, or Ian Alert depending on the region, but the message is all the same. Someone has gone missing and the police need the public's help to find them. Basically, an MEP is an Amber Alert, but it can be sent out for any age, including adults, without the need of an abduction. In fact, silver alerts can be given through this code, and there's a few times it has, like in January 2026 in Valley County, Idaho.
The Valley County Sheriff's Office is looking for 2 missing persons who were last seen on January 19th in Garden Valley, Idaho and are believed to be in danger. Missing persons are Dennis and Carol Mbagi, 72 and 74 years old. If you have any information on the whereabouts of these missing persons, please contact Valley County Sheriff's Office.
And both the Ambergris were found safe. Though this alert is very seldom seen, with very few captures being made of it, and the captures that do exist are smartphone recordings. But they still count, so here's a case in Kentucky in August 2025 when an autistic teen went missing in the Bowling Green area.
At the request of Warren County Sheriff Office, an EAN alert has been issued for Bentley Burton, 14 with autism, last seen in Bowling Green, Kentucky. If seen, do not approach. Call 911 or contact Warren County Sheriff Office.
And Bentley would be found safe and returned to his family. In the rare instance you do happen to get this alert, be on the lookout for someone who looks like the person specified in the alert, and contact the authorities if you do see them. Yet again an odd one, since this alert is unimplemented in the US system, but appears to be in use for Canada's Alert Ready system? I can't confirm that, but nonetheless, the National Audible Test could be issued as a part of a nationwide test of the EAS, while focusing on the audible part, making sure the audio of the alert is good enough for an actual proper nationwide alert to be sent out. Of course, since this alert is not implemented, we probably will never see it be properly issued. But if it were to be properly implemented, and you got it as a real and official alert, then no real action would be required, other than making sure that you can actually hear the message. Another alert that has since been retired, and in fact has actually been removed from the same system. The National Information Center would have come after an emergency action notification, giving updates and further information on the situation at hand. These alerts weren't necessarily directive, meaning that they give you instructions to do, but rather informative, letting viewers or listeners know what's going on. Yet, despite its inclusion in the same codes, it was never used. Probably the same reasoning as why the EAN was never properly used, considering that the US never had a large-scale nationwide threat during the EAS's history. And while the EAS system was being modernized, this alert went away as it became redundant to have. Welcome back to Canada, whose weather radios are the sole users of this alert. A network notification message is issued when broadcast stations have technical difficulties, and need to alert the public that they won't be getting news or weather for a while until the issue is fixed. And it does seem that the only place you can hear this alert is if you own a weather radio tuned into an Environment Canada radio station that is having technical difficulties. Luckily, there have been some captures of this alert, like in May 2015, so at least this alert has that going for it, unlike some other ones.
We are currently experiencing technical difficulties with our broadcast. We hope to have the system return to normal operation as soon as possible. We are sorry for the interruption.
Anywho, no action is needed. Just wait out the issues and you'll be good to listen to your weather forecasts. That is, until Weather Radio Canada got killed off, but Ah yes, the alert that everyone knows and loves. The nationwide test of the EAS is exactly what it says on the tin, a test of the EAS across the country. Formerly the National Periodic Test, hence the code being NPT, and also called the Presidential Test on some smartphones, this is the alert that the news and government hype up every year, only for there to be disappointment from all involved. Every few years, the government tests the EAS to make sure that if a nationwide emergency happens, the president could quickly relay information to the entire country. God forbid we'd ever need that to happen. Of course, these alerts always work, and never in any way, shape, or form screw up, and they go out fully without a hitch. Can you sense the sarcasm in my voice? The last time this alert was issued was in October 2023, and we're probably overdue for a new one. Or maybe they thought the 2023 alert went off so well that they didn't feel the need to test it again for a while. Who knows?
This is a nationwide test of the Emergency Alert System, issued by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, covering the United States from 2:20 to 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time. This is only a test. No action is required by the public.
Anywho, no action is required here. Just sit back and listen to those sweet, sweet same tones. Pretty much the exact opposite of the National Audible Test. The National Silent Test is to theoretically test if systems can receive EAS alerts without being heard by the public. It would probably be able to be seen on TV as a crawl or activation screen, and you might even have it be heard on radio, which sounds weird, but it probably would just be someone telling you that a test is occurring followed by silence. Again, the entire point is to test the back-end systems, not to annoy the public. Yeah, this is weird. I have no clue. And it's never been issued to my knowledge, so who knows? Alright, now we're getting back into the swing of things. No more odd national alerts, let's get back to what's important here. Radiation. A nuclear power plant warning is issued when either a site area emergency or a general emergency occurs at a nuclear power plant. A site area emergency means that the event is contained to the plant, where nothing should happen off-site, while a general emergency is when an event is expected to have an effect on places within 10 miles from the plant. Now, thankfully, no power plant meltdowns have occurred that causes alert to be issued for real, but it has been issued, just as tests, as was the case in July 2022 near the Salem/Hope Creek Nuclear Generating Station.
This is a test. This message is for people in New Jersey only. At approximately 7:20 p.m. today, a routine test of the Salem/Hope Creek Nuclear Generating Station siren system was conducted. Officials from the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management advised that there is no emergency at the Salem/Hope Creek Nuclear Generating Station.
These tests are normally accompanied by siren testing as well, leading to probably one of the most horrifying combinations of sounds I can imagine. But there was a time this alert was issued claiming to be real, and we only have Canada to thank for that. Let's go, boys! In January 2020, an alert ready alert was erroneously issued claiming that there was an incident at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station in Ontario. The alert also claimed that there was no abnormal release of radioactivity, like, oh thanks, that helps quell the nerves.
This is a Province of Ontario emergency bulletin which applies to people within 10 kilometers of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. An incident was reported at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. There has been no abnormal release of radioactivity from the station, and emergency staff are responding to the situation. People near the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station do not need to take any protective actions at this time.
Of course, this was done in error, and it seems like it was done in a similar fashion to how the Hawaii missile alert happened. A test or training exercise was occurring internally, but accidentally got outside of the testing environment, causing residents near Pickering to probably think that they were going to get irradiated. Thankfully, other than that one time, this alert has never been issued legitimately. Should one legitimately be issued, however, you should follow instructions given to you in the alert, as well as instructions given to you by the power company who owns the plant. You may have to evacuate or shelter in place depending on what's going on. We're sticking with the radioactive theme with this one. A radiological hazard warning is a step up from a nuclear power plant warning. This alert is specifically for when radiological materials have been detected in an area and pose a threat to those around it. This can be a follow-up to a NUW, but also for when vehicles carrying radioactive materials crash, when radioactive materials are naturally discovered in an area, or as a response to nuclear attacks. 'Cause, you know, fallout and stuff. Now, thankfully, this alert has never been issued for an actual warning. Except for one time. In February 2020, Wave Broadband in Jefferson County, Washington was hacked due to having a default password on their encoder. And as such, someone going by the name Mr. Gerd began to issue several alerts, having fun and memeing on the whole situation. Yet the first alert he issued was a radiological hazard warning for the entirety of Washington. But instead of a message telling you to not get irradiated, it was instead the Young Thug and Gunna song, Hot. And as far as we know, the person never got caught. They're running free right now, knowing full well they advertised vine sauce to a whole ass county and are laughing about it. I've talked about this before as well, and apparently, according to some comments I got, Mr. Gerd is a reference to a substitute teacher in the Seattle area, Bob Gerd, who'd tell elaborate fake stories about his life. From radioactive alien spiders living in his garage, to being chased by a bear, to eating so many carrots he turned orange. Sounds like a fun teacher, I gotta admit. Either way, if you get this alert, you'll probably be advised to either shelter in place or evacuate. No matter the case, take it very seriously. Radiation ain't no joke. I'm bundling these together since they're pretty much the same thing, and in fact, are probably the most common alerts out there. The required monthly and weekly tests are issued once a month and once a week, respectively, go figure, testing the systems to make sure that they can send and receive alerts. Monthly tests are accompanied by an audio message explaining that it was just a test, while weekly tests normally are just the header and tail, though some stations will have an audio message before and or after the alert. As these alerts are insanely common, there's a plethora of captures on the internet, so there's nothing really that interesting about any of them. The only interesting thing of note I can find is that they won't be issued when a major television event is happening, like the Super Bowl or the Olympics. Which, yeah, makes sense. Us Americans need our sports ball, goddammit. I know nothing about ships and vessels and other nautical stuff, so this is just gonna be me spouting off words and hoping it makes sense. A special marine warning is issued when hazardous weather conditions threaten safety to those aboard ships and vessels on the water. This warning is issued when the following weather conditions are expected: winds of 34 knots or more, hail 3/4 inch in diameter, or waterspouts, aka water tornadoes. Basically, when a thunderstorm goes over large bodies of water, expect this alert to be issued if the storm is severe enough. These tend to be issued alongside things like severe thunderstorm warnings, so long as there's lots of water around the area. Now, the reason I'm being nondescript about the bodies of water that this alert can be issued for is because it can be any body of water large enough, not just oceans. In fact, SMWs are often issued for the Great Lakes, as was the case in August 2025, when one was issued for some harbors and Lake Michigan.
At 6:47 p.m., strong thunderstorms were located from Waukegan Harbor to Buffalo Grove and were moving northeast at 25 knots. Hazard, wind gusts 34 knots or greater. Impact, small craft could be damaged and briefly higher winds and suddenly higher waves. Move to safe harbor immediately as gusty winds and high waves are expected.
If you get this alert and you're actively on a boat, take measures to protect both yourself and your boat by putting on life jackets and, I guess, battening down the hatches. And if you're on land, be wary of waterspouts making their way ashore, since they're quite literally tornadoes. There also seems to be an unimplemented special marine watch, but there's quite literally nothing about it other than an article on the Emergency Alert System Wikia, and even then the page is the most stubbiest stub that I ever stubbed, so take it with a grain of salt. Another odd catch-all type of alert. A special weather statement is issued when strong weather is going to be happening, but it doesn't qualify for an actual alert. For example, thunderstorms with wind gusts of 40 to 55 miles an hour aren't enough to make the cut for a severe thunderstorm warning, so some agencies might issue a special weather statement to inform the public of it. It can also be issued for fog that may impact driving, but not the rest of the general public, like in February 2025 in Indiana.
Some patchy dense fog, quarter mile or less, will be possible over the next several hours. If traveling, slow down and give yourself extra time to arrive at your destination.
Now, these alerts aren't tones, meaning that they'll just kind of appear if you're listening to your weather radio. There is a possibility of them being on TVs and radio, but in reality, unless you're tuned into your weather radio or perusing the NWS's website, you'll never see this alert. If you see this alert, there may be some warnings to heed, like making sure things outside don't blow away in the winds or traveling a bit slower in fog, but otherwise you can go about your day normally. This is one I hope to God I never have to see. A shelter-in-place warning is issued when an event happens that requires residents to seek shelter in a building until further notice. As we've discussed in other alerts, this can be for things like severe weather or hazardous materials releases, but its most horrifying issuance would be during so-called law enforcement activity. Basically, some shit's going down and the cops don't want random citizens to get involved. This could be something as tame as looking for a suspect of a robbery, like was the case in Clinton, Pennsylvania in 2023.
Attention. Residents of the Spruce Run RD area of Lamar Township and Green Township, which includes Nittany Ridge Road, Ronga Road in the vicinity, shelter in place until further notice due to law enforcement activity. Police are searching for a robbery suspect in the area described as white male, brown hair, 59 to 170 lbs. Suspect may be armed. Suspect is believed to be on foot, wearing blue jeans. Unknown further clothing description at this time. If seen, do not approach and call 911.
All the way up to a mass shooting happening, like was the case in Androscoggin County, Maine in 2023.
Androscoggin County officials have issued a county-wide shelter-in-place order. Please make sure your homes and vehicles are secured. Updates from officials will be forthcoming.
From what I can find, the suspect in the robbery case was Craig Hawk Miller, and was found and arrested a whole year later, after leading police on a multi-county manhunt following his robbery of a gas station. After trial and a litany of charges, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison with parole possible after 57 months. And with the shooting, the suspect was Robert Card, who went to several businesses around Lewiston, Pennsylvania and opened fire, killing 18 and injuring 13 more, before fleeing the area and taking his own life 2 days later. If you get an SPW, then you should seek shelter in a building and lock all doors and windows. Depending on the situation, you might also want to turn off any AC or fans that can bring chemicals into the building, or even shutting off all the lights and closing all the blinds if a criminal suspect is on the loose. The alerts may tell you how to properly shelter in place, maybe not. It depends on how in detail the issuers want to be. But one thing always remains consistent: get inside and fast. More winter weather, hooray! A snow squall warning is issued when snow showers cause low visibility, gusty winds, and heavy snowfall. Specifically, there has to be at least 2 inches of snow in 30 minutes, at least 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts, and/or visibility less than a quarter of a mile. This tends to happen in the more northern states since, like I've mentioned, snowfall is quite common there, but it can happen anywhere if the snow and wind mix together just right, like was the case in New Mexico in December 2022.
At 10:45 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, a dangerous snow squall was located along a line extending from 7 miles southeast of Frijoles to San Felipe Pueblo, moving east at 55 miles per hour. Hazard: poor visibility in snow and blowing snow. Wind gusts greater than 30 miles per hour. Impact: dangerous, life-threatening travel. Slow down and turn on headlights. The visibility will suddenly drop to near zero in whiteout conditions. Slow down. Rapid changes in visibility and road conditions are expected along with snow accumulations. Be alert for sudden whiteout conditions.
If you get this warning, stay inside and stay warm. Because of poor visibility, don't try to drive, and if you are driving, either drive extremely slowly and carefully, or pull over and wait for the whiteout conditions to stop. Plus, black ice could form if conditions are right, so you might also lose traction while driving. And more flooding! Yay! Storm surge watches and warnings are issued when storm surges, or ocean water being pushed far inland by tropical storms or cyclones, could potentially happen or are expected to happen / actively happening. As such, only coastal states get this alert, much like the coastal flood watch or warning. The difference between the two? I mean, the National Weather Service says that the difference is that storm surge alerts should be issued in relation to tropical cyclones, while coastal flood alerts are for unusually high tides or flooding related to normal rainstorms, but as always with this sort of thing, it ends up being whatever the local NWS station feels like that day. The difference between the watch and warning seems to be both potential for a storm surge to occur and timing. Watches might be issued to give you 48-hour notice, while warnings are always given with 36-hour notice. Anywho, this alert has been issued several times for various hurricanes that have hit the US, though, in all honesty, they're all fairly boring to listen to, since they don't really give that much information.
A storm surge watch has been upgraded to a storm surge warning, and a tropical storm watch is in effect for the following county: Eastern Putnam, Florida.
But I'll give you some. If you get this alert, leave anywhere near the shore and get to higher ground. And if you can evacuate, remember to turn around, don't drown. Finally, we're on to something that I'm a bit more familiar with, and I assume most of you are too if you're watching this. Severe thunderstorms are categorized as thunderstorms with either 60+ mile-an-hour wind gusts or 1-inch diameter hail. But that's just the base level of a severe thunderstorm, and there's 3 other levels of severity for storms. Base is what we just discussed: 60 mile-an-hour winds and 1-inch or quarter-sized hail. Considerable is 70 mile-an-hour wind gusts and hail 1.75 inches to 2.5 inches, golf ball to tennis ball sized. Destructive is 80 mile-an-hour wind gusts and hail greater than or equal to 2.75 inches, or baseball sized. This will also trigger a WEA on smartphones. Then there's extremely destructive, which is 90+ mile-an-hour wind gusts, 2.75 inches or greater hail, and may contain the line "you're in a life-threatening situation" in the alert. Cloud-to-ground lightning doesn't really play a role in the issuance of an SVA or SVR, but it should be noted that thunderstorms are thunderstorms for a reason, so take precautions where necessary. Now, I've actually been under a few destructive SVRs before, one for 80+ mile-an-hour winds and one for 3-inch diameter hail, both at my college town only about a month apart. I didn't get any proper captures of the alert since I don't have a TV, nor did I want to annoy my roommate with a weather radio, but I do have the WEAs that I got, and here's an extremely destructive SVR from Minnesota in June 2022, where you can hear just how the alert sounds.
At 7:06 p.m., severe thunderstorms were located along a line extending from Herrick to near Crookston,
moving northeast at 25 miles per hour. These are destructive storms for Thief River Falls and Old Mill State Park. Hazard, 90 miles per hour wind gusts and half-dollar size hail. Impact, you are in a life-threatening situation. Flying debris may be deadly to those caught without shelter. Mobile homes will be heavily damaged or destroyed. Homes and businesses will have substantial roof and window damage. Expect extensive tree damage and power outages. This is an extremely dangerous situation with tornado-like wind speeds expected. For your protection, move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a building. These storms have the potential to cause serious injury and significant property damage.
Again, it's a fairly common alert, especially in the summer months. If one's issued, you should probably stay indoors, especially if there's a hail risk. You should also probably not be swimming in this weather, because lightning striking a pool or other body of water you're in would be less than ideal, and heavy rains could help in drowning. There's also talk of using wireless devices like wireless keyboards and mice, but I don't buy that quite personally. In short, keep all living creatures inside until the storm passes. And stay tuned into the news, as severe thunderstorms could indicate tornadoes are possible. An odd one again here, but one that actually relates to the last. Severe weather statements are updates that are given regarding a previously issued severe weather alert, either a severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning. This seems to be fairly rarely seen on TVs and radios, and often goes untoned on weather radios, because it really is just an update, most likely just saying that this warning has been extended to this time kind of stuff. Though there does exist one fairly funny recording of this one being issued on a TV, in which something went wrong with the audio, causing the text-to-speech voice to sound like, well...
A severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect for Warren and southeastern Pike counties and southwest Indiana until 6:45 p.m.
It's crazy how the only alert I can find for this one has Stitch giving the information. Ohana means family, and that family better be inside. Either way, no action is necessarily needed, as this alert is just for updates. But do pay attention, as it could tell you how long you'll have to stay sheltered from the storms. We're finally here, the bread and butter of the EAS system as far as I'm concerned. The coveted Tornado Watch and Warning. Buckle up, this is going to be a long one. The reason I say that this is the bread and butter of the EAS is because the US is really built for tornadoes to be commonplace, since we have a whole load of flat land where weather is most likely to have tornadoes form, and tornadoes love flat land. And as such, that creates our famous Tornado Alley. There's also Dixie Alley in the south as well. Either way, a tornado watch is issued when conditions are favorable for the development of tornadoes, and a warning is issued when rotation is seen on radar, or if a tornado has actually been confirmed. In fact, there are 3 types of tornado warning, much like the severe thunderstorm warning. The first is the base standard, where radar indicated rotation causes the alert to be issued at a bare minimum. Then there's the PDS tornado warning, PDS standing for particularly dangerous situation. Other alerts can also get this PDS suffix per se, but tornadoes are often what they're associated with. PDS warnings can't be issued if the tornado is just radar indicated. It has to at minimum be confirmed by radar, by seeing debris lofted on the correlation coefficient, or observed by a human. And then the elusive tornado emergency, used very seldomly. The NWS says there has to be at least 70 knots of rotational velocity, an imminent or ongoing severe threat to human life, imminent or ongoing catastrophic damage, and a confirmed tornado, either visually seen or radar confirmed. But that's not where it ends, as most offices will only issue a tornado emergency when a large and dangerous tornado is heading straight towards a heavily populated area. The other criteria still do apply, but you're probably not going to get a tornado emergency if you're just out in the middle of a field, for example. And that makes sense, because if a very strong tornado just went over some farmland, then dissipates, there's no real danger to most of the public, so an emergency isn't warranted. But then you can say, well, what about those who live on that farmland? And then we get into some type of trolley problem. I'm very underqualified to give an answer to that, so I'll leave it to you to argue in the comments about it. Hell, it's bringing more views anyway. Anywho, I've been talking for too long. Let's get into some actual alerts, damn it. Now, as I said, this type of alert is fairly common in many parts of the US, specifically during the spring and summer when storms are common. But I do want to point out a few oddities within this alert. In April 2022, a tornado emergency was issued for portions of Arkansas. However, no tornado ever spawned. Now, like I said, emergencies should have a confirmed tornado to even issue the alert. So how on earth did this alert get issued when no tornado existed in that area at that time? Well, it's a long story, and YouTuber Alfaria has a great video on the topic, but in summary, the area was far into the radar's dead zones where proper data becomes extremely muddy. Hail was also making the data even muddier. This was during the nighttime when tornadoes are insanely harder to see, and some jackass was sending in false storm reports of a large wedge tornado and cars being flipped over. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Really do check out Alfaria's video, it's really well done. But here's the actual alert that got sent out due to these shenanigans.
Tornado emergency for southwest Greene County and northern Craighead County. 8:01 p.m. Central Daylight Time. A confirmed large and destructive tornado was observed over Black Rock, moving southeast at 50 miles per hour. Tornado emergency for Fontaine and Bono. This is a particularly dangerous situation. Take cover now. Hazard. Deadly tornado. Source. Radar confirmed tornado. Impact. You are in a life-threatening situation. Flying debris may be deadly to those caught without shelter. Mobile homes will be destroyed. Considerable damage to homes, businesses, and vehicles is likely, and complete destruction is possible. To repeat, a large, extremely dangerous, and potentially deadly tornado is on the ground.
Anywho, here's one that's a little bit more funnier, where the text-to-speech voice yet again goes off the rails for some reason. And not only that, but the same in attention tones too.
Yeah. Oh my god. That is creepy. Oh my god. This is scary as Oh my god.
Now, I've been rambling on about this one alert for way too long now, but it's because it hits close to home. Yeah, 2025 was a great year for tornadoes in St. Louis, let me tell you. Anywho, what you should do. Take shelter in an interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building, away from windows. If you're in a mobile home, seek shelter in a more sturdy building, one with a solid foundation. And if you're driving, either seek refuge in a building, or if time's running out, lie face down in a ditch away from vehicles and trees, covering your neck and head. And remember that highway overpasses are a death trap, and their supposed safety during a tornado is a myth. They become wind tunnels. You know, physics stuff. Jesus Christ, I talked about this one for a long time. Let's just move on. 911 is our easy way to report emergencies quickly and efficiently, but it does run on the phone systems, so errors are bound to happen. A 911 telephone outage emergency is issued when those issues arise, telling people in an area that 911 won't work for a period of time. Now, this isn't all that bad. The alerts will normally give one or a few numbers for police, fire, and/or medical emergencies, but remembering all those numbers is way more difficult than remembering 911. But they can also reroute any 911 calls to another nearby call center, as was the case in Thurston, Washington in January 2022.
Thurston 911 Communications is not receiving 911 calls. Thurston County 911 calls are being rerouted to an alternate 911 center for processing. For emergencies, continue to dial 911. Do not test the 911 system unless you are having an emergency.
There also was a massive case of 911 outages in Louisiana and Mississippi in September 2025, where there was a case in Lamar, Mississippi when 911 worked on landlines, but not cell phones.
911 outage for Lamar County. The state 911 system has had a critical incident and 911 may first not be available from a cellular phone. You can still call 911 from a landline phone. If you have an emergency, you can contact 911 dispatch at the following numbers.
Bet you wish you still had that fancy schmancy landline headset now, eh? Either way, if you get this alert, make sure to note down the numbers listed in the alert for alternative methods of contacting emergency services, or look them up online. Just cause 911's out doesn't necessarily mean the whole internet is. We're back out to sea, lads. Or, well, near the sea. Tropical storm watches and warnings are one step up from the storm surge alerts, but one step down from the hurricane alerts. So effectively, these alerts warn for a tropical cyclone that isn't up to hurricane strength. Still though, they can be harsh, with these alerts being issued for when winds are expected to be between 39 and 73 miles an hour in the next 48 or 36 hours. Depending on whether or not the alert was a watch or a warning. So just because this is a step down from a hurricane warning doesn't mean that it's any less dangerous. And plus, tropical storms can also produce tornadoes, storm surges, and flash floods, so best to play it safe when it comes to these alerts. Now, these alerts have the same issue as the storm surge alerts, wherein they are very boring to listen to and don't give that much information, other than where the alerts are issued to.
A tropical storm watch has been upgraded to a tropical storm warning for the following counties in South Carolina.
So yet again, I have to fill you in. Unlike hurricane alerts, you won't need to necessarily either immediately evacuate or board up your windows and brace for impact, but you should stay indoors, and if you need to travel, don't drive during heavy flooding. How many times do I need to repeat turn around, don't drown before it gets old? We ain't escaping the ocean yet. In fact, it's coming right towards you. Tsunami watches and warnings are issued normally after earthquakes or aftershocks, when tsunamis are either predicted to happen or are expected to happen / are actively making their way to land. As such, these alerts only get issued for coastal states, but specifically tend to be the West Coast. And even then, really only Alaska and Hawaii get these alerts because of the amount of earthquakes and volcanic activity near or in those states. But that's not to say that the West Coast states in the lower 48 haven't gotten tsunami alerts. Far from it. In fact, they did it as recently as July 2025, because of that same Kamchatka Peninsula earthquake that happened in Russia that we discussed during the civil danger warning section. Yeah, remember that one? It's been a hot minute. Anywho, that earthquake is in a 3-way tie for the 6th strongest earthquake by magnitude since 1900, with an 8.8 moment magnitude. The tsunami that formed wasn't that bad, all things considered, with most places seeing a meter-high wave come inland, though there were some isolated incidents where some areas saw up to 33 meters. But nonetheless, it did exist and had the potential to do damage, so warnings were sent out to places like Hawaii and California.
This is the National Weather Service with a tsunami warning bulletin from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. A tsunami warning is in effect for the state of Hawaii at 2:43 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time. An earthquake occurred at 1:25 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time with a preliminary magnitude of 8.7 in the vicinity of the east coast of Kamchatka, Russia. A tsunami has been generated which could cause damage to low-lying coastal areas within the state of Hawaii.
Tsunami warning. Repeat, tsunami warning. The National Weather Service has issued a tsunami warning for the following locations. Coastal Del Norte. If you are located in this coastal area, move inland to higher ground.
And speaking of, there were also alerts sent out for the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami that happened in March 2011, which had a moment magnitude of around 9.0, the 4th strongest earthquake by magnitude, and caused insane amounts of devastation to Japan.
National Weather Service has issued a tsunami warning for the coastal areas of northern and central California. This is a result of an 8.9 earthquake near Honshu, Japan, that struck at 2:46 local time in the afternoon in Japan.
So what should you do? Get to higher ground or to a dedicated tsunami safe zone. And if an earthquake has just occurred in your area, wait until the shaking stops to do so. I think that this is a contender for the scariest alert that you can receive via the EAS. As you'd expect, a volcano warning is issued when a volcano is either about to erupt or is currently erupting. There's a ranking system set up by the US Geological Survey and many more local volcano observatories that help the public know where the volcano is at. Normal/green means that the volcano isn't erupting. Advisory/yellow means that there's increased activity and it is being closely monitored. Watch/orange means that the volcano is very active and has a good chance of erupting soon, or is currently erupting with minor to no ash emission. And warning/red means that the volcano is either about to erupt with a lot of ashfall, or is currently erupting with a lot of ashfall and other emissions. Now thankfully this is an alert that hasn't actually been issued, but it has been erroneously issued. In fact, it's been erroneously issued twice. The first was in July 2022, when in Scottsbluff County, Nebraska, a wildfire alert was meant to be issued, but instead of it being something like an EVI, it used the VOW event code.
Panhandle alert. Wildfire evacuation. Evacuate the area of Carter Canyon Road between Summit Ranch Road to County Road 17. Immediately evacuate.
The message itself makes perfect sense in isolation, no mention of volcanoes or ashfall or anything of the sort, but it was improperly coded. The second event happened in June 2025, where we go right back to Hawaii, where they erroneously issued a VOW for the entire state. Now this was because of an internal test making its way out to the public. Now, where have I heard that one before? Something about Hawaii and making internal tests public, man, it's astounding. Now, this alert doesn't seem to have been properly caught, but here's a recreation I could find that I'm sure does the job well enough.
The civil authority has issued volcano warning for the following counties or areas. Hawaii, testing. Aloha, this is only a proficiency demonstration test message utilizing the demo code from the Hawaii Emergency Operations Center. Thank you FEMA IPOS team for all you do. No action is required.
And this is the other alert that is in Mexico's SASMEX system, called Alerta Volcánica. Now, I can't speak Spanish, so I can't really find out if this has been issued before legitimately in Mexico. So if you know, please leave a comment. I should mention here that SASMEX is also apparently planning on implementing more alerts like hurricane alerts but they're not currently implemented. But back to volcanoes. If you actually do get this alert, what should you do? Well, get the fuck out of the area. Not necessarily because of lava flow, but rather the volcanic ash that can be created. Not only is it horribly dangerous to inhale, and it can contaminate water supplies, but it is also heavy as fuck, and can do great harm just because of its weight. This one's fun because as I'm writing this, I'm currently under this alert. I'm freezing fucking cold. A winter storm has different classifications depending on area, since some areas are more prone to snowy and cold weather than others. Some areas might issue an alert for as little as an inch, some might be half a foot. It's all up to how that area deals with winter weather. But the difference between the winter storm alerts and a blizzard warning is that winter storm alerts are issued for snow or ice accumulation, while blizzard warnings are issued for high wind speeds. That's not to say that visibility won't be limited during winter storms, that can happen, but it's mainly for how much snow is on the ground. Now, weather alerts aren't all that interesting, but I did find an alert from 2003 that was actually a cancellation of a winter storm warning, rather than an issuance of one.
Here is a winter weather statement from the National Weather Service in Taunton, Massachusetts. Issued at 11:40 this morning. The winter storm warning for Cheshire and Hillsborough counties in southwest New Hampshire has expired. Significant snowfall has ended. Therefore, the winter storm warning has been allowed to expire.
Now, what should you do? Well, stay inside as much as possible. If you do decide to travel, do so with extreme caution, since snow and ice on the roads can cause you to lose traction. The NWS also recommends having blankets, food, water, and a flashlight in your car in case of emergencies, but on the down low, I think that's kinda overkill. And if you're traveling by foot, firstly, God help you, and secondly, bundle up with several layers of loose-fitting lightweight clothing. So those are all the alerts that are currently implemented somewhere where same codes are used. But we're not done yet. There are a few that could potentially be used in the future. The US currently says that they're just not implemented, but Canada says that they could be implemented in the future. So let's check out those to see what could be. A biological hazard warning is very similar to a radiological hazard warning, except instead of deadly radiation, it's deadly biological contaminants. Now, this isn't for things like standard diseases that get passed around, like the common cold or flu or even COVID, but rather for when some biological contaminant escapes containment, and now poses a threat to those around the area of release. If this alert was to be issued, you'd probably be told to shelter in place and stay vigilant for any symptoms. If you were to have those symptoms, you should contact authorities immediately and follow instructions on how to dispose of anything contaminated, and clean yourself thoroughly. You'd also probably want to wear a mask so that you wouldn't get sick in the first place. Sticking on the subject of contamination, a boil water warning, or a boil water advisory, is an alert that would tell residents in an area to boil any tap water before using. The authorities would suggest that you use bottled water for consumption, but if that isn't available, then bring any tap water to a rolling boil for 60 seconds before using. But in areas 6,500 feet above sea level, the water should be at a rolling boil for 3 minutes before using. It should also be known that any water that connects to a water line, such as a fridge's water dispenser or ice maker, shouldn't be used as well. Now, this alert apparently has been issued once, but it is completely undocumented. But that's not to say that boil water advisories are never issued. They're just never issued under the BWW code. Most commonly, they are issued as local area emergencies or civil danger warnings, like in Iowa in November 2023, where a local area emergency was issued telling residents of the city of Ackley to boil water after a water main break.
Urgent alert. The city of Ackley has issued a boil order until further notice. All water for human consumption must be boiled. Use bottled or boiled water for drinking, and to prepare and cook food. If bottled water is not available, bring water to a full rolling boil for 1 minute. After boiling, allow the water to cool before use.
So what should you do? Well, boil your water. Like I said, bring tap water to a rolling boil for 1 to 3 minutes depending on elevation, and then wait for it to cool down before using. We've had radiation, we've had biological agents, and now get ready for chemical spills. Yeah, the chemical hazard warning is the same song and dance as the other hazard warnings before it, except this time, it's chemicals. These chemicals can be corrosive, toxic, volatile, or otherwise hazardous, and pose a threat to those in the surrounding area if they were to get out. But apparently, this alert can also be used if a dangerous chemical goes missing in an area, meaning that either someone just misplaced it or someone wants to use it for more nefarious means. Now, depending on the chemical that was released, you might be asked to either shelter in place or evacuate immediately. You may also be asked to stay away from any substance that the chemical could react with. If anything you own is contaminated, properly throw it away. Why they couldn't call the first one a damn break watch, I'll never know, but Here we are. The dam watch and dam break warning are for when a dam either has the potential to break or is going to / actively is breaking. These are probably unimplemented because flash flood alerts tend to hit the same points, but with a broader distinction of any flash flood, and not just dam breaks. In fact, we've already discussed a dam break causing a flash flood warning earlier, so that goes to prove my point. Either way, if you receive these alerts, you should avoid the river the dam is connected to, and you should remember the saying by now when it comes to floods: turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roads. If only this was around in 2020. The contagious disease warning would be issued when an outbreak of a virus occurs in an area. I'm sure if this was implemented, there would be hundreds of alerts saying that COVID is on the loose back in 2020, and to stay home. And that's really what you should do if this warning were to be issued. Avoid public areas. And if you see someone who's suffering the symptoms of the virus, get them to a hospital. So the evacuation watch is basically a precursor to an evacuation immediate, saying that something's going to be going on in your area and you should leave, but you have time to get your bearings and head out the door. For example, if there were a hurricane in the ocean ready to ram its way up into the state, but isn't quite there yet, you could issue an EVA and tell everyone, hey, you should get some stuff together so you don't have to scramble to rush out once this thing makes landfall. So yeah, prepare in a way that the alert says to do, and then make your way out of the area until officials say it's safe to go back. A whole lot of contamination in this bunch, huh? The food contamination warning would be issued if a certain foodstuff has been found to have been contaminated by some kind of virus, such as E. coli. The CDC and/or FDA would advise you to not consume any of the contaminated products, and they might even tell you to not throw it away so that it can be used for investigatory purposes. And if someone has consumed the contaminated foodstuff, they should be medically treated as soon as possible. Would have been helpful to have this when the Walmart radioactive shrimp was going around. I remember way back in 2019 when I first got myself insanely interested in the EAS, seeing this alert on the Wikipedia for SAME codes and it having no explanation attached to it and wondering, what the fuck is this alert? Well, it seems fairly obvious, but it's one that stuck with me all these years. An iceberg warning would be issued when dangerous icebergs are located by some sea vessel, or if conditions are likely to create said iceberg. Now, if there were to be a smaller, less dangerous iceberg, alerts would be issued under small craft advisories, an untoned alert that is only seen on the NWS website and NOAA weather radios. Anywho, should you get this alert and are actively driving a vessel, then avoid any nearby glaciers that have a high confidence of creating icebergs. Simple as. An industrial fire warning would be issued when a hazardous fire in an industrial area, like warehouses, factories, or power plants, poses a significant threat to citizens surrounding it. This is not only because of fire being generally not good for health and safety, but also the smoke fumes that can arise from said fire, which are also generally considered bad for health. And depending on the location of the fire, releases of any chemical because of the fire could also pose a threat to life. But in actuality, this alert boils down to either an evacuation immediate or a shelter-in-place warning, maybe a civil emergency message. And as such, you should follow any instructions the alert gives, whether it be to stay indoors and prevent breathing in any fumes, or get the hell out of the area and wait for an all clear. A landslide warning would be issued when a landslide is either about to happen or is actively ongoing. Landslides can happen for a number of reasons, whether it be earthquakes, heavy rainfall, or unstable soil. But those events tend to be the more major event, with landslides being a secondary aspect. So landslides are mentioned in earthquake and flash flood warnings as something that can happen due to the earthquake or flood. You might also hear about landslides from things like a civil danger warning or an evacuation immediate. With landslides, you should avoid the areas, obviously, and only evacuate if it is safe to do so, getting to higher ground. Not a point of sale or piece of shit. A power outage statement or power outage advisory would notify people of widespread and/or long-lasting power outages in an area. You would get info on where the outage is, estimated restoration times, and any precautions because of the outage, such as conserving generator fuel or avoiding power lines. And power outages could cause other alerts to be issued, like a 911 telephone outage emergency, or a civil danger warning telling citizens to boil water. Now, because of the nature of this alert, this might not air on TV since most TVs require wall power to work, but you definitely would still get updates via phones or radios. Now, this alert is fairly redundant since most people will immediately go to their power provider's website to see any outages and get the most accurate times, or, well, as accurate as it can be. Amarin. And other alerts like civil emergency messages or severe weather statements can also be used to give info on power outages. If you are in a power outage, follow any precautions your utility provider gives. If your water runs on electricity, conserve water. If you have medical equipment that relies on power, either get to somewhere with power or consult a healthcare professional. If it's a cold month, keep yourself warm via fireplaces or wood stoves, but nothing that's gas powered, and ensure proper ventilation. And if it's hot, keep to a cool area of your house, use battery operated fans, and drink plenty of water. A wildfire watch or warning would be issued when conditions are favorable for wildfires to develop, or if wildfires are predicted to happen / are actively happening. This could be because of dry and windy weather, droughts, high temps and low humidity, or an increase in activities involving fires, like camping. Now, this alert is redundant because of other alerts, such as a fire warning, or even some untoned alerts like red flag warnings and fire weather watches, which pretty much tell people to not burn anything and be aware that any fires that may develop can and will spread quickly. Wildfire alerts would basically be that, but over a large area, which isn't that needed. If these alerts were to be issued, remember to not do any outdoor burning, along with following any precautions given. You might also want to clear out any dry vegetation surrounding your house to prevent fire spreading to your house. And if a warning were to be issued, follow any evacuation orders given to you. And that's every alert officially in the SAME codes. Now, I have mentioned a few here that are only seen on the NWS's website or as untoned alerts on NOAA weather radios. And I think I should just briefly mention them here lest some uber geek flames me in the comments for forgetting something. So, air quality alert, air stagnation advisory, ashfall advisory and warning, avalanche advisory, aerial flood advisory, beach hazard statement, blowing tuss advisory and warning, brisk wind advisory, coastal flood advisory and statement, cold weather advisory, dense fog advisory, dense smoke advisory, dust advisory, extreme cold watch and warning, extreme fire danger, extreme heat watch and warning, fire weather watch, flood advisory, freezing fog advisory, freezing spray advisory, frost advisory, gale watch and warning, hard freeze watch and warning, hazardous seas watch and warning, hazardous weather outlook, heat advisory, heavy freezing spray watch and warning, high surf advisory and warning, hurricane force wind watch and warning, hydrologic outlook, ice storm warning, lake effect snow warning, lake wind advisory, lakeshore flood advisory and statement, low water advisory, marine weather statement, red flag warning, rip current statement, small craft advisory for hazardous seas, rough bar and winds, storm watch and warning, tropical cyclone statement, tsunami advisory, wind advisory, winter weather advisory, Jesus Christ. And that's probably not even all of them. I'm just looking at some NWS common alerting protocol documentation to find them. So if I missed one, I don't care. Complain in the comments, it gets me more impressions anyway. So clearly the EAS has a bunch of alerts, and they pretty much encompass the entirety of the term emergency. No matter what happens, there's a good chance you'll get an alert for it. Whether it be for something as trivial as strong storms to more serious things like an impending nuclear attack where all hope is lost and you're certain to die, rest assured that you'll be notified that it's happening. Especially if you're one of those people who have like a bajillion weather radios for some reason. Either way, is the EAS system perfect? No. But it ain't broken. So if that's the case, then there's no need to fix what— Hey, I was talking!